we were on Senator Frank Bloss's amendment, and Senator Underwood had spoken on that amendment, and then I understand that you do have an amendment to the amendment. Senator, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I would like to proffer the following amendment, which is to add a new...
Point of order.
I'm sorry?
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Yes, please.
Prior to us recessing, there was an amendment proffered by the good senator from Tamuning. She has not withdrawn it, as I know. So for her to make another amendment, she needs to withdraw the original amendment.
We're trying to find out first of all what it is, because I don't even know what it is either.
No, I'm just saying before this amendment that she's about to proffer, there was an amendment she proffered that reads, "A decision to continue or terminate a program will be determined by the results of the evaluation." And so that motion is in place right now, and until she withdraws that, she cannot move another amendment to amend the amendment.
Okay. No, I understand that, but I don't even have the amendment to see. That's why I'm trying to find out, first of all, exactly what the amendment is. So if you have, let's just take 1 minute brief recess, okay? The legislature is back in session. One more time, is that prior to lunch, Senator Frank Blossett proffered an amendment, and Senator Underwood, I know you had spoken and had offered an amendment to an amendment, and I understand now you want to make a motion to withdraw.
I withdraw my amendment, Madam Speaker, to
The amendment proffered by...
to the amendment
Senator
proffered by the good senator from Barrigada.
Okay, and that amendment was to basically say that a decision to continue or terminate would be as a result of the evaluation. So there are no objections to that withdrawal? So ordered. So we're back with Senator Bloss then on your amendment, and I don't have anyone, Senator Spauldon, on the amendment proffered by Senator Bloss, the first one.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, to me, this amendment, although I know what the good senator is trying to do in terms of reaching a compromise, which we do on legislation, I'm not sure this satisfies me, and I'll tell you why. Right now, this amendment basically says the evaluation of this pilot program will be completed no later than 3 years after the date of implementation, etc. 3 years. I guess the question I have in my mind is that how many prisoners or how many people who have been convicted of a sexual crime in terms of rape are up for parole or probation within 3 years? Because if the statistics show that we really have nobody up for probation or will be qualified to request for probation within 3 years, then the statistics will be zero. And then you're operating off a basis of whether we're going to continue this program or discontinue it off a number or a statistic that really we didn't allow to go further on to try to see how effective this program could be. 3 years might be too short. And until we understand how many people, how many convicted sex felons are going to be eligible for parole or probation, right? We don't know how much time we should give this program to implement. So it doesn't make sense until we know that figure, Madam Speaker. And so I don't know if I'm going to object or just change the years to a longer term. But again, even if I use an arbitrarily longer time period of, say, for example, 7 years, right? Even I can't justify that 7 years if within that 7-year period there is nobody eligible for parole or probation who has committed a sex crime. So it's a very difficult proposition to put forth, because then this just might be almost an empty promise or an empty guideline. So if I could ask for a minute, maybe, Madam Speaker, just to kind of ferret this out and what's the best procedural way to go about it. Do we need information from DOC to understand that? Do we need information from the judiciary to, let's say there's X amount of people who may qualify within the next 3 years? Because even then, say for example, there are several who might qualify in 3 years' time or even 2.5 years' time, you really can't monitor the effectiveness of this program until it's been implemented and they've served the full duration of their parole or their probation. So 3 years may be a little too short, and it's unsubstantiated in terms of the timeline.
We'll go and take a recess.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. The legislature's back from recess. I think when we left for recess, we were on Senator Frank Blas's amendment, but Jimmy Espaldon. So, Senator Espaldon, are you yielding to anybody?
Madam Speaker, when we last left off, I had asked a question to find out some information. So at this point, I believe that the author of the bill went to retrieve that information. And the question really was how many people incarcerated or who have been convicted of a sex crime are available or eligible for parole within the next 3 years. And that was, I believe, some information that the author of the bill was going to secure.
Thank you, Senator Espaldon. So, Senator Brent McCready, would you like to answer that inquiry?
Thank you. And I do yield to the question. And we did find out that out of the 161 sex offenders that are incarcerated currently, more than 10 will be eligible for parole or probation when this act becomes sunset. So, more than 10. And that's coming from the Parole Authority.
Thank you, Senator Brandt. Senator Espaldon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That's actually a staggering figure, the 161 prisoners up at DOC out of the population of, probably about 400 incarcerated right now. But I guess the answer to my question was there'll be more than 10 within the next, more than 10 convicted sexual felons who will be eligible for parole or probation within the next 3 years. And with that, Madam Speaker, I thank the author finding that information out. The argument that I was proffering, of course, was that, for a pilot program, if we're going to go for a 3-year implementation and there's nobody who's available to even participate or to request for parole or who has the prospect of being released on probation, then there is no evaluation of this project, and to give it a 3-year timeline would be unreasonable at this time. However, with those numbers at 10, it might provide at least some kind of information for which we can do an evaluate, or they would be able to do an evaluation on, and we might be able to take a look at to see whether this program continues. With that, Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Espaldon. Anyone else on the amendment? So, Senator Blas, would you like to close? No?
I think that, remember we bifurcated the amendment. There's 2 different amendments on that one page, so we're just dealing with addressing the first one.
Would be the evaluation of this pilot program will be completed
right,
no longer.
Right, that's the one.
Okay, on that motion, are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. Senator Blas, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, as a, I guess, to augment or to strengthen and to reiterate, that evaluation and the requirement for that evaluation, there is, starting on line 14, page 4 of the bill, to add a new section, subsection 5 to 80-102, subsection A, to read a requirement that the Department of Corrections develop evaluation criteria and evaluate this pilot program no later than 3 years after the date of implementation of the program, and that an evaluation report be transmitted to the parole board upon completion.
On the motion, anybody? Did you want to speak on it, Senator Blas, or?
And what that does is it repeats what was what we added. We added into section 80-101. We just want to make sure that it's caught. Do you have that?
Yes.
It was the first one. Here, have it.
It's on the bottom of the previous amendment. On the amendment, the Blas amendment, anyone wishing to speak? If there's no one wishing to speak, any Senator Underwood? You're acknowledged on the amendment.
Your mic's not on. Your mic's not on. Your mic is not on. There you go.
I believe that is appropriate. You know, I don't have a problem with them transmitting it to the parole board upon completion, but as I had noted earlier, there has to be some kind of action that's usually taken relative to an evaluation program and a pilot program. Right. So.
And I think that, Madam Speaker, as I move, because I'm going to move your amendment to the,
Okay.
there is going to be from that action to a next action. Okay, that's going to be necessary, but that's not going to be addressed in this section here. That'll be addressed in a new section as I move on. So I still got the floor.
Thank you, Senator Blas, for the clarification on the amendment. Anyone else wishing to speak? Are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. Senator Blas, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, you know, this is just so that we can do some cleanup on this thing. As I did earlier, in my very first amendment, we had changed the shall to a may on page 3, line 3. Now, you know, recognizing that, and I want to thank, you know, the good senator from Manila to be able to point this out, is that we may possibly need to be able to make an amendment to page 3, line 9, where it says a person required. We may need to change that to a person who voluntarily agrees. Go ahead.
So
that's
the
just the
amendment
proper
would be on line 9, sub item D, a person, delete required, who voluntarily agrees?
Right.
On that amendment, Senator Espaldon, you recognize.
Madam Speaker, I appreciate the mover of the amendment trying to be consistent in terms of whether it's going to be mandated or discretionary. However, in terms of, because of the previous amendment that we had made, the previous amendment basically says the parole board may require as a condition. So they may require it depending on their discretion. However, under this section, on line 9, it's under section D, a person required to undergo, and again, I know that we're trying to be consistent in terms of the may and the discretion. However, the discretion is really with the parole board, right, to require an inmate to either undergo this treatment or not. So the person would still be required to undergo a treatment if the parole board says that's what they need to do. So at this point, because of that, and since this is not directed towards the rules of the parole board, which we already have given the discretion to, this is more as once the board says, yes, we're going to tell you're required to take this treatment, then we don't need to change this section because that person is going to be required by the board. So with that, Madam Speaker, I would have to say I object.
I withdraw the amendment.
On the motion to withdraw, without any objection, Motion carries.
Okay.
Senator Blush, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, one of the things that I guess, and I appreciate the discussions that we had during the breaks, is while we ask the Department of Corrections to promulgate and to create the rules and the regulation, there is the AAA process that is necessary, and the bill does not contain the AAA provision or basically any language that says that that the promulgation of these rules will be subject to the AAA process. I asked for amendment to that, and as far as the rules, and look to the assistance from the clerk and from the legal counsel in being able to make sure that is so noted in the rules. And they're both agreeing. They're both
Under
saying yes.
rules, so are you going to add,
It's just in accordance, promulgate the rules in accordance with the AAA process.
and that would be on page 4? Under rules, the Department of Corrections shall adopt.
The rules adopted under the subsection shall be subject to the AAA process and shall include but not limited to.
Does everybody understand that? On that motion? On that amendment? Are there any objections? Senator Blush, can you just make sure that the clerk has all these amendments? I know we're trying
Yeah, they're scratching
to
their head
save
already.
trees, but,
I won't raid their cookie jar,
okay.
or I will while they're
Senator
raiding-
Blush,
while they're raiding my meeting.
you still have the floor, my brother.
Thank you. I think this is going to culminate with the last one. And quite honestly, and I appreciate, this is an amendment that I promised and I will proffer for the good lady from Zonia. Tumuning? Is it from Tumuning now? She changed. Okay. Okay, Tumuning. I was going to say Santa Rita, but it's the autism. I get. All right, it's basically a sunset provision. We talk about the program, we want to talk about the effectiveness. And, recognizing that there's going to be a need to be able to not just evaluate the effectiveness of this program and provide basically a timeline as to how long this period is going to last, when the evaluation is going to occur, and what could occur, and what should occur, basically, what should occur, and what mechanism can be utilized to be able to continue this program should we find that it's effective, okay? And so I'd like to be able to proffer a new section to go on line 5. I'm sorry. It's going to be now a new page 5. Or no, page 5. 30-second recess, man. 30 seconds.
I'll give you. We are in recess. The legislature is back from recess. Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, again, the amendment that I'm going to proffer, it will be to add a new 80-105, and I know that we probably have gotten there are some changes to this. It says subsection 80.105 sunset provision, and it will read, the pilot treatment program shall come to an end 48 months after the date of the implementation of this program. And then it will continue on, a detailed evaluation report which addresses the effectiveness of this program shall be provided to the legislature in Guam to determine if legislation should be passed authorizing its continuation.
Do you have that up? I don't see that amendment.
You know?
Do you have a copy?
I
have a
reading
copy.
all over it. Okay, give me a break recess so I can get it to you. Recess, please. Recess.
Moment's recess. The legislature's back from recess. Senator Blas? Oh, okay.
Okay, so when you look at it, just and the whole thing is finished, so then
Yes, we're on right now. So Senator Blas, you want to go ahead and speak while they're making the copies?
Madam Chair, I thank the good lady from Tumuning, in my effort to be able to help and being able to create a better bill. What will be passed out to you shortly is basically a collaboration between her and I to address the issue with regards to the sunset provision for the bill. And what the amendment would do is it would create that the program will have a sunset in 48 months, but within that process, that within a 36-month time period, a copy of the evaluation report will be provided to the legislature, so the legislature itself can determine as to whether or not there should be new legislation to continue the program. So that is in essence what the amendment would proffer.
Okay. So I'll go ahead, just to be clear, reread it. Section 80.105, the sunset provision. The pilot treatment program shall come to an end 48 months after the date of the implementation of this program, period. A detailed evaluation report which addresses the effectiveness and the financial impact of the pilot treatment program shall be provided to a legislatura in Guam by the 36th month of the implementation of this program to determine if new legislation should be passed authorizing its continuation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. As copies are being passed on the amendment, we would call it the Bloss-Underwood or Underwood-Bloss amendment. Bloss-Underwood amendment.
I'm not going to go there.
Anybody wishing to speak on this amendment?
It's a bipartisan amendment, ma'am.
Bipartisan amendment. Anybody wishing to speak? If not, are there any objections to this?
No. No. He does have.
I will go ahead and give consideration. Senator Tom Atta.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Of course, the amendment reads that a detailed evaluation report shall be provided to the legislature, but it doesn't say who's to do that evaluation. And we probably need to be more specific that shall be provided by the Department of Corrections to Legislatura in Guam. Or by the,
I'm going to go ahead and take that as an amendment to the amendment that has been passed. So on Senator Atta's amendment, clerk, did you get that one? Are there, Senator Tom, if you could just read it one more time for the sake of Senator Espaldon.
Okay, so on the 4th line, it shall read, and it's just to be as specific as to who's responsible for providing this evaluation report. And so it should read then, shall be provided by the Director of the Department of Corrections to a Legislatura en Guam. So there's somebody accountable for the report.
Thank you, Senator Atta. Duly noted. Anybody on that amendment? No objection? Thank you, my brother. I will continue the gavel down. Madam Speaker. Okay. Anybody else? Vice Speaker Cruz, you're recognized on the main motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, maybe I should have spoken earlier and spoken after this senator from Santa Rita. Because if you look at the committee report has no statement from the Director of Corrections, from the Parole Board, from the Judiciary, from the Attorney General's office. Their silence is deafening. I would have gotten up and objected to the other provisions in this. I mean, it's not that I'm opposed to trying to protect our children. I've devoted 40 years of my life to doing this. And many of you have actually had to suffer my rants about breeders having children. But I keep getting reminded by every single person who's ever been to a law school, or even some that haven't, reminding me that this is a constitutional democracy and I cannot force sterilization. But I just wanted to underscore that point about the fact that there needs to be something at the beginning to try to address this issue, not everything at the very end. And those of you that attended the round table with the judiciary the other day heard me again on that rant, and my staff jumped all over me about my using an analogy that I used when I testified before the legislature 45 years ago. About the judiciary being at the very end of the entire body politic, but that something had to be done at the beginning. Something had to be done, not so much to determine what was going, you had to figure out what was going in, what's happening. And this bill reminds me of my days when I would teach at the universities and at the university extension courses that were on the base. And all the young people were hollering and screaming about wanting to have more. You had to be more strict. You had to be more strict, do something. You had to, an eye for an eye. And talking about the Code of Hammurabi. And I had to remind all of them, if we were still in the days of Babylon and the Code of Hammurabi, how many of us would have any appendages on our body? And this discussion about taking this anti-androgen to reduce the libido and affect just one part of the body, the penile function. I don't need to remind any of you that sexual gratification isn't only in one part. Is there going to be a piece of legislation to cut out tongues, cut off fingers, cut off hands? Because even in this bill, on page 3, if a person voluntarily undergoes a permanent surgical alternative to treatment under subsection B of this section, he or she shall not be subject to hormone or anti-androgen treatment under this section. All costs of such permanent surgical alternative shall be paid by the person undergoing such procedure. Translated, if you get an actual castration, you don't need to undergo the treatment. And if you want to pay for it and get out of jail because you get the castration, great. But what if that person's rape was not penile injection? How many times do we read in the paper about digital penetration, oral? And so if I can afford, and I haven't been able to find it in here, where they're talking about the cost of it, and it's to be borne by the person. So that means if a defendant has $40,000 a year to be able to pay for the treatment, they can get out. But the poor schmuck who really has reformed has to stay in because he can't afford the $40,000 a year for treatment. But the kid from the rich family can get out because his parents or he himself has enough money to pay the $40,000 a year. And even if he is on the androgen or has gone through the actual castration, he has other parts of his body that he can use to violate people. And anyone who has studied rape, it's not an issue of sexual gratification, it's an issue of power. I'm not going to make any motions to send it back. I'm just going to allow it to take its course, and if necessary, go to the courts and have them resolve it. But I think it really should be very indicative to us that they have been demonstrably silent. The ones that are going to implement this, the ones that are going to enforce it, none of them have spoken up. Thank you, Madam.
You're welcome, Vice Speaker. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Toniata, you're recognized on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, from the onset, I'm glad that the motion to send this legislation back to committee failed. Just like any bills, all bills should have a public hearing, and all bills that make it to this floor should be deliberated on. And I think that collectively, the different amendments that have been placed into this bill, I believe, has strengthened this bill. And I think that whenever you get the body to deliberate on this on bills and able to come up with something that can work, it's not the silver bullet, it's not the magic bullet, but it's an alternative solution. Moving it from mandatory to a voluntary program, it just makes it an alternative solution. And I commend the author for introducing this legislation and having the courage to at least do something. We have a chronic problem with offenders and repeated offenders. And hopefully that even if it's just one person that volunteers to go through this program and it helps them, that they come out and speak up on it and say that, yes, it's not the work all or the make all to end all problems, because we will never find a solution to end all problems. Problems evolve. You go on and you make one issue, you find a solution for that, another issue will come up for the same exact problem. But it's how we address it and how we move forward. It's this body actually doing something to try to make a difference in not only the victims' lives, but the sexual predators' lives. And if they can volunteer and go out and go through this program and it helps them, then so be it. But it's a solution, it's an alternative solution that at least we're trying to make a difference. And I hope that my colleagues will look at it and hope that they vote on it so that we can move forward and at least come up with some type of solution to a problem that has plagued our island for many years, and I believe it'll plague our island for many more years to come. But we got to start somewhere. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Ad. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Morrison and then Senator Espaldon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was listening very closely to my colleagues address this measure, and I learned a lot of how this treatment or process may be work, or I'm sure there's still a lot to learn about it. I'm sure our people are probably still confused of how this is going to be handled. I've come out of church and hear a lot of my family members have a clear misunderstanding of how this process is supposed to work. So I appreciate that we've had a discussion today, and I'm glad that we were able to continue on and allow for this process to bring much more awareness to our people of what we're trying to do here. But this also brings me back, Madam Speaker, to my visit to the Department of Corrections. And I think some of us have went up there and took a tour. But, Madam Speaker, how do you maintain something that's not maintainable? And how do you even try to implement, so to speak, prison industries or a bureau that would help to guide these individuals out into back into the real world, the civilian world, have a job, have an opportunity? I was always wondering how individuals go into the Department of Corrections as committed a mistake, minor infraction, they're paying for their crimes, isolated in a cage. But when I took a tour up to that facility, Madam Speaker, I now know why some individuals go in there as monkeys and come out as gorillas. It's not designed to correct these behaviors. And that's what's happening up there. That is the root of a lot of these repeat offenders. Their behaviors are not being corrected properly. There is no such industries up there to guide them to when they get out. Where would they go? What social programs are going to be available for them? So it kind of brings me back to a time where we were discussing potential opportunities to reconstruct or rebuild or build a new facility, modernize the system that can incorporate such programs. A Bureau of Industries that can be a program that's truly functional, that can guide these folks that are in there for these types of crimes and will come out better people. They're not coming out better people, Madam Speaker. I went up there twice with my colleague. So it goes back to this bill. Obviously, it looks like we're just working around a big problem up there, because I'm sure my colleague's going to share more alarming numbers that a lot of these folks that are coming out, more than half of them are repeat offenders. but we're sending them in there. We're sending them to supposedly a correctional facility that is not correcting the problem, and they're coming out 10 times, 100 times more dangerous. I bring this up, Madam Speaker, because I was in full support of finding a way to modernize that system up there. Yes, there's efforts being made to address some challenges, a court order, but Madam Speaker, we got to walk through that facility in and out and see exactly why these individuals are the way they are. They are isolated in a cage. They're obviously, when you put an animal in a cage with a certain problem and you can't correct it, once they get out wild, loose, and drastic things happen. I bring this up, Madam Speaker, because I know there's a measure that was discussed. I don't want it to lose discussion. I really feel that we need to find ways to truly modernize that correction facility up there. Or let's not stop, possibly we're not going to be able to call that a correction facility, knowing what type of people are coming out of there. So, Madam Speaker, I appreciate the discussion on this. I think there could be more in the future to add to this, build upon it. There's other types of crimes that I feel that should be incorporated in this, but I think this is a great start. But we need to go back to the basics of where are these individuals at, the cages that they're locked up in there, and are they getting the correction or correcting that behavior that they need to before they come out so they don't do this again. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Morrison. Do we have anybody else on the main motion? Senator Espaldon, I will recognize you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when this bill was first introduced, I really wasn't sure whether I could support it. And in fact, even as late as yesterday, when I found out that this bill was going to be on the agenda, I still was not sure whether I support it. And even up to right now, I haven't really made a firm decision to go one way or the other. However, that being said, the discussion that has taken place today on this bill has really given me time to really pause and reflect on many things. In fact, even just as late as last night, I came in yesterday thinking that, okay, this bill is going to be on. I had my reservations. I probably won't vote for it. I probably wouldn't have voted for it if we just went right to the call of question. But I do appreciate the very first speaker who spoke on it, who actually called us out, who actually said he would love to hear everybody's opinion, whether they're for it or against it, and at least give us the reason why. And I appreciated that. And as a result, people started speaking. Our colleagues started speaking to the issue. There were some very real concerns from my colleagues on the floor. One who mentioned several issues. One was that this bill of a chemical castration really provides, first of all, a false sense of security. And I wish he would have elaborated a little bit more, but I can understand what he was trying to say, because that was one of the issues that I had in my mind also. When you take a look at this bill basically provides for a chemical castration, or at least initially as it was introduced, chemical castration, right, for those who are up for parole or probation. Not for anybody who's been convicted and is in prison, but those who are on the verge of coming out or have the potential to at least be eligible for parole. And please understand that parole is not something that's granted just because you serve X amount of years. You have to serve a certain period of time of your sentence before you become eligible for parole. And even at that point, it's the inmate who has to request for parole, as opposed to the board saying you're on parole, right? Once the inmate requests it, then I believe the way it is, and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong, right, that parole is for a period of up to around 3 years. So the way I understand it is that anybody who may be coming out for parole, who requests for parole, right, at least before we made some amendments to the bill, would be required, mandatorily required, to go through chemical castration as a result of his requirement or his request to go parole, and then he would have to agree to this process. However, the bill has evolved since then. Now it is no longer mandatory, which was a big objection by several colleagues on the floor who had a real problem with making this program mandatory. We've eliminated that concern by providing more of a discretionary approach that the parole board now has. They don't have to require it of anybody going for parole or probation. They may require it. And I would imagine that goes to the very issue that they would have to consider concerning one of concerning the information that was brought up by a previous speaker, right? And that is that all rape is not necessarily intercourse in terms of the penis entering the vagina. It could be oral, it could be by digits of the finger, it could be different means. So I would imagine that now that they have the discretion, they would, in the best interest and use of this law, require it for those perhaps who had penile intercourse with the victim. But again, now it's up to the board to determine. That alleviates one concern. Another issue that was brought up earlier was that one of our colleagues was very against the concept of imposing a behavior-altering drug as a prerequisite to be placed in parole or on probation, right? We have eliminated that also by, again, making it discretionary upon the parole board of when and who will be required to go through this treatment. Where do I stand on this now? Well, actually, let me just go one step further. There was also a previous speaker who I highly respect. Not that I don't respect everybody here, but just because, you know, because of the experience he has under him. And the statement was made, and it was made by also a previous speaker, right, that there was no input at the public hearing from the judiciary, from the parole board, from the director of corrections and whatnot, and bottom line, the silence was deafening. Well, Madam Speaker, if they wanted to come and put their input, they would have been here. To me, that silence was not so much deafening, it was more of a deference to the legislature. If we are going to set this policy, then so be it. That's the way I read their silence. If they did not intend to come and testify in favor or against this bill, to me, that says, you guys argue it out, you guys debate it on the floor, and if that's the policy that the legislature wants to implement for this island, when it comes to sex offenders and their eligibility for parole and probation, then so be it. So I'm not really sure that I can agree with that point, that the silence was deafening. It would have been nice, it would have been great to get some input, but the fact that they weren't here does not mean that they're against it. It might just mean that they're going to allow us the deference to pass the policy for our island, which then they will be responsible for implementing. The previous speaker also mentioned the fact that he's always bothered by the fact there are so many people who are having kids who probably shouldn't be having kids, but because you can't mandate sterilization for these people, You just can't do it. This is not that situation, right? That's a whole different situation. This situation involves people who have actually victimized other people, who have basically forced themselves sexually upon a victim, and who have been convicted of a crime, right? And have had to have served X amount of years before they're even eligible for parole and probation. So again, I'm not sure that that analogy works well with this specific class of people. And so I perhaps cannot go along with that analogy as 100% on point for this specific bill. That being said, Madam Speaker, I still don't know where I stand on it. I think I'm going to have to go home, take a real good look at it, go over a lot of the notes that I took as I was researching this issue. I know there are pros and cons. I know that there are 7 or 8 states who have implemented chemical castration. There have been scientific reports that come out that says long-term use of these kind of drugs on a person could definitely have negative health ramifications on the people that are administered this drug. One of them being definitely osteoporosis and the weakness of the bones, a little puffiness and things like that, and so forth and so forth. But again, I just always come back to what is the length, the duration of parole on this island, right? And that's 3 years. And again, I guess it comes back to my original concern that this legislation at the onset seemed to me to be an initial reaction, a knee-jerk reaction to what was happening out in the community. We have seen and heard of some horrifying incidences where rape has occurred on young girls, on women. Excuse me. And was this the answer to preventing rape? It isn't. It really isn't. Because again, this program only endures for as long as probation or parole is granted. If it's 3 years on parole, then you administer it 3 years only. After that, the person who is released on parole or probation no longer is required to be on these drugs and no longer will have their libido basically stifled by these drugs, and anything can happen at that point. But during that period of time, upon their release from prison, while they're out on parole and or probation, at least there will be some kind of, I guess I'll use the word deterrent very loosely, deterrent or some kind of inhibitor for them to go out and create the same crime, sex crime again. The author of this bill very aptly noted the statistics, of which I did do some research myself, in terms of the recidivism rate of those who had to go through this kind of treatment is much lower than those who did not. And so for us, what that means is during that period of time when someone is released from prison on parole or probation, at least during that period of time, we should at least hope to get the same kind of results in terms of recidivism to a very low rate, during which time they might also really try to improve themselves and really come to terms with the wrongs that they have done in the past, right? And again, just gives them a little more time without having that urge to go out and commit that crime again. And again, I don't know the pure science behind it. This is only a tool that was mentioned by another colleague, of which is now available for those who have perpetrated a crime in sex, a sex crime on another person. But again, it's not a silver bullet. It doesn't reduce the crime rate on this island for those who have never committed a crime. It doesn't stop them from doing it, but it does, and especially since we've weakened it, or at least modified it from having it be a mandated treatment, now it's just at the discretion of the parole board on who should have to avail themselves of this kind of treatment. So, with that said, I thank the body for all the input, for the changes that have been made. There have been some significant changes that now, after X amount of months, 48 months, this thing will sunset, but within 36 months, we will have a report from the Department of Corrections in terms of the evaluation of this program, and we'll determine at that point whether we will continue this program or not. That said, though, I would like to proffer amendment at this point. 30 seconds, Madam Speaker, before I proffer the amendment.
We're in recess. The legislature is back from recess. Senator Espadon, your amendment, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this amendment would be on page 2, line 25. And this amendment was passed out. It was supposed to be proffered by Senator Frank Blas Jr., and for some reason was not proffered by him. And so I will now proffer this amendment. And that would be on line 25, replace a semicolon with a comma. And then after the word "and," we add the words "a competent psychologist for a psychological evaluation, semicolon, and." So in other words, the line on the sentence on line 25 shall read, excuse me, it starts on line 23, I believe, to refer persons found most likely to benefit from hormone or anti-androgen treatment to a competent physician for medical evaluation, and a competent psychologist for psychological evaluation, comma, and. And again, this is written, it's been provided to the clerk and all the senators.
On that amendment, anybody wishing to speak? Are there any objections? No objection. Motion carries. Senator Espadon, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, again, I guess when it comes down to it, in terms of my vote, I know that when we first went into this bill, there were many on the floor, many of our colleagues on the floor who had a real big problem with it for one reason or another, and I did too. However, when you really take a look at the bigger picture, you know, and focusing in on the original intent of the author and the bigger picture, right, I'm not sure that I cannot support this at this time. In other words, why should we be giving too much consideration to those who perpetrated a crime against our children, against our women, and against anybody else? And if they have to go through something like this, then so be it. They caused wrong. And this is in itself may be the deterrent for anyone who might be thinking along those lines, that it's okay to go ahead and criminally and sexually violate another person, right, without having to suffer the real consequences. And this is just one of them. Aside from incarceration and perhaps a host of other punishments that would go with that upon capture and conviction, this is another one that they would need to consider. So with that being said, Madam Speaker, I will dwell on this issue a lot more before we vote tomorrow, but I seem to be leaning in favor of this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator Espadon. Anyone else on the main motion? Senator Rodriguez?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this legislation. You know, I can never speak of an experience of being a victim of a sex crime. And as far as I know, I don't think any of us in here can speak of being a victim of a sex crime. I don't know. I'm just, I'll speak for myself. But also, Madam Speaker, I'm going to speak as a father of a beautiful 19-year-old daughter. And when you have legislation like this, Madam Speaker, that really strengthens our laws and makes it and puts a deterrent in committing future crimes, I think it's something that we should really be able to support and be able to recognize the mover of this legislation on what he's trying to do. I think just listening to the discussions this past from today, I think, and the previous speaker did mention it, that we may be giving too much consideration to these perpetrators. And you know, Madam Speaker, I'm one person that everyone makes mistakes in life. We do the crime, we pay the time. We do the crime, we pay for it. And everyone deserves a second, third, fourth chance in life. But what this legislation is trying to do, Madam Speaker, is that as a condition of parole, or as when a perpetrator is up for parole or probation, has to go through this, what this legislation is proposing, especially now with all the amendments and all the discussion that we had on this piece of legislation. I think it's something we really got to be able to support. As policymakers, we talk about we want to be tough on crime, but also as for us here who are parents. And I'm going to ask my colleagues to please, as we think about this and consider how we vote on this, is to think about the victims. Think about the victims, the experience that I, or if anyone here has never experienced a sex crime upon them or family member. Think about what kind of message this will be sending as well. And so I don't want to speak more about it. I know there may be others who want to speak, but just want to join the authors and ask my colleagues to please support this legislation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Rodriguez. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator McCready, you can close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I had a closing statement, but enough has been said today by everyone in the body, and this is what should have been done. And I thank the body for the common sense, the education, the opposition that turned into compromise. And I think compromise and common sense was what got us through today. So I thank the body for that. I would like to add, make an amendment to add Senator Blas, Senator Espadon, Senator Morrison, and Senator Rodriguez.
On that motion, are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. On the third reading, on the voting file, no objection. Motion carries. We will be in recess till 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.